Hafa. This is Tori Manley speaking as a guest host for Fanachu. On our episode with the environment and us, this month we get into different conversations and our barriers between what our reality looks like now and how we can get closer to a sustainable society. Our first barrier, lack of awareness. In order for us to have a truly sustainable society, we must explore what it means to be conscious, ask questions, and grow our mindfulness in how we interact with our bodies, each other, and the earth. As we eat more locally sourced foods, our bodies will be healthier and more energized, and we'll know who we are and how to express ourselves better because we're eating foods that work in collaboration with our bodies instead of against our bodies. Collaboration with land, sea, and sky, and each other is a part of the Pacific Island heritage. Let's go further into that. Indigenous people have cultivated knowledge about the land and how we can interact with the land that meets our needs, as well as what we can learn from the land. What we learn from our environment has been passed down to us from generation to generation, and not all of that information is lost. The information is not lost because I believe in the information stored in our DNA, and I believe the same information is true about plants. Now, all of plants, animals, and humans have genetic information that eating locally sourced fresh fruits, vegetables, legumes, and meats can give you the most recent up-to-date information your body needs to be in tune with the land and to have a greater understanding of the land. We can understand the land and the environment around us by eating locally sourced food, and that locally sourced food has information that collaborates well with our bodies. When we eat spinach from a place that recently had an oil spill, for example, we'll get sick because the plants harbor information or oil that doesn't belong on the surface of the ground, and it doesn't belong in our bodies. When I grow my own food, people always tell me that it's sweet. And it could be all of the nurturing love and effort I put into my plants. Maybe that statement resonates with you as well. So my call to action to you, I invite you to grow your own food, support local farmers, and share these gifts of nutrition and nature information, such as fruits, vegetables, legumes, meats, if you're able to cultivate that. Share all of that nutrients of nature's abundance with friends and family. And when we start to share these gifts of the earth, we can create a more sustainable community. Another barrier to consider is convenience, accessibility, affordability, and the mindset that goes alongside what we value as consumers. The idea of all of these barriers is to unveil the idea that monocrops and big chains can cause huge dysfunction in our society. A particular population on Guam, I won't say who they are, but they say that Guam doesn't have anything. So when I hear people say, "You don't have anything," their idea of everything that's important to them, such as Target, Walmart, In-N-Out Burger, these are places you can probably think of that these companies had the intention to provide goods and services of a regulated standard that's easily accessible and affordable. That's their idea of everything. On the other side of that coin, my family and I, just as an example, went to a big city where they had such similar oversized huge chain companies. Some people would say this place has everything. You could shop around and get anything you want. But my little brother, interestingly, he's 9 years old, He absolutely hated it because, in his eyes, the city had nothing. One night, after a long day of sightseeing and walking, he was so excited to leave this city because he craved fruits and vegetables, and he craved picking food off the land and harvesting veggies. And he said that the city has nothing. Like, there's nothing here. There's no fruits, there's no vegetables. On Guam, we have everything. There's vegetables, and I really could use some vegetable curry right now. So, using that example, I wanted to associate these ideas of corporations with our food, where we get our food, monoculture, which is the cultivation of a single crop in a given area. And I also wanted to associate the idea of small businesses and local sustainable initiatives with polyculture, which is the cultivation of several crops or kinds of animals simultaneously being cultivated in a given area. So, with those two examples resonating with you, my call to action for you is to think about how your body feels after eating at a chain restaurant compared to locally sourced food. Note your energy levels. Do you feel like you can tackle the rest of your day with your best capabilities? I invite you to take these two realities and explore the question, what is good for our bodies and planet? So for this episode, we are talking to Jessica from Triton Farms and Chris from the Beekeepers Association. They both share resources and their stories about cultivating food on a local scale. Enjoy.
Half a day. My name is Jessica Nangauta. I work at the University of Guam Triton Farm. I've been working here since 2010, going through school. So I started part-time, full-time, and after I graduated, took over the management position. So I think over almost 12 years now. When I was maybe like 4 or 5 years old, I keep on to that memory of going to the ranch, riding on my papa's tractor, picking some of the fruits that they had growing. And then I lost that when I was in high school. I was into, the social part of growing up. And so once I graduated from high school, I went into college, and my family is a family of farmers and food catering business. And so they're like, why don't you go into business and learn the book side? Because that's our weakness. And so I tried one class, but hated it. I couldn't think like mix and how to make a profit out of people and, make money, and center amount money. So no, I just took some ag classes and I super loved it at UOG. And I kept on the farm, and then I've had kids while I was in school, like 3 of my babies while I was taking school. So I think my kids also instill that purpose and passion in me, because I want them to feel how I felt going outside and picking the fruits of your labor, your family's labor, and consuming the food, and also instilling that onto the next generation when we have these farm tours come. And it's so easy to be distracted by social media and the phone and technology. What I love most is really having the students come and visit, do farm tours with them, because important to our work that the next generation kind of, take the torch and carry it on forward. And one of the most rewarding parts of my job is like seeing people's joy when they come to the farm and like, whoa, I didn't even know this existed, or I've been living in Jigo for 40 years. I've never known about this farm. And then, it really, you can see and feel the energy that emits from them, that, of course, being around nature, being around plants and that produce fruits and vegetables that we can consume, it's a good feeling, right? That's one of the most rewarding parts of the job. So yeah, totally change of vibe. And especially the kids, oh my gosh, I think that's really, it's fun because when the kids come, they're like ready to let loose. It's a farm. You can see a big open field. So they get so excited, especially being with the animals and like being able to use their senses when they're learning. You smell the taki manuk, you're holding the chicken, you're feeling its soft feathers. after COVID time, the prices of everything skyrocketed, including our feed. So, we take a lot of data. So when we collect our eggs, we know how much eggs we produce and how much we sell. And we know the cost of feed. So we had to balance to make sure that we used to be $5, and then we had to put it to $6 because the cost of feed went up too. So $6 is the max right now for our farm. It wasn't until the last 80 years that we've actually relied heavily on imports, and for millennia, like generations, thousands of years before, we've relied on our environment, our resources, our land to provide what we need, and our ocean around us. I'm not going to say that I never eat fast foods, because I still do at some point, but really good at when you eat something fresh, like a fruit and a vegetable, you can feel it in your cells, in your body, that it just really brings energy and makes you feel alive, right?
Yeah.
And really learning the science and the health benefits of eating fresh and local and organic, naturally grown foods are just more healthy for your body, and that you want to live a long, healthy life. I have children. I want to make sure that I'm staying healthy and also being an example for them to be exposed to the different fruits and vegetables and not shy away from it. I mean, when I had my first kid, like his first foods were the local foods. It was kamuti and banana. And so starting them off at a very early age is so crucial to getting that in their palate, so when they're older. And my son now, he loves everything, vegetables, anything, he'll chow it. So important that for those, young people that will soon to be parents, to instill that in your kid at an early age. And I already see the benefit in my children, that they love to have that in their palate. So, and if you're older and you still love the fast foods and stuff, I mean, just thinking about the health benefits of, eating fresh food, and some people say that it's more expensive and maybe it's more time consuming to prepare your own home cooked meals, but man, the benefits just outweigh everything. I don't know what to say about that. And so if a price point is something that had bothered someone, or then we definitely accommodate. Look at the carbon footprint of just bringing in imported things from the ship. It travels thousands of miles away from whatever, Mexico to the US to Guam. So we're really cutting off a lot of all of that gas emission and waste that are coming in, not to mention the packaging that they have to be in. We get creative sometimes with our packaging. If we run out of recycled bags, then we'll use like banana leaves or things to wrap the produce. We had this one woman who asked if we not use any plastic. She gave us a big pickle jar, and we put her produce in the pickle jar. So there's cool creative ways that we still like try to reduce the trash when it is local source, but definitely notice that in buying local, you're reducing a lot of carbon emissions and waste. And after COVID, during COVID time, when people like were afraid to go to the grocery stores or their mom and pop stores, they would come here, buy their produce, because you barely have traffic here, and starting their gardens. And because we also produce seedlings and share seeds, so that people hoping to help them, empower them to do their own gardening at home. So there's been a definite increase since 2019 or 2020 when COVID hit, because we saw that like the shipments stopped coming in as frequently. There were some bare shelves, and what do we do when there's a lockdown? How are we going to feed our families? So like definitely people starting their own gardens have increased. There's a push to grow other crops that maybe you're going to find in the supermarket, but you want a local version. So we've done research projects on like what type of varieties of zucchini grow on Guam, or the eggplant that does best here, or what's the cucumber varieties that are less more resistant to bugs. So we still do those research projects on things that are not so much native, but because we want to push into the market of buying local versus, buying imported. So some of the products that we have available is like lettuce, basil, mint, eggs, calamansi, kamuti, what else? Bananas, cucumber, butterfly peas. We do sell chickens, however, because we don't have a slaughterhouse on Guam, we cannot kill the bird for you, or like what's the correct term? We cannot slaughter the bird for you. The university does have their annual workshop. I just don't know when it's scheduled for this year. Okay. But now that you mentioned, it's possible that we can line one up if there's interest. People have asked us many times, but it's against public health. So, but we do sell live chickens, and then we also sell tilapia alive too. We're in Jigo. We're on top of the northern aquifer. So we are an organic farm. We make sure that everything we do is naturally sourced, and that we're not using synthetic chemicals and fertilizers on our field, because we are conscious that we're on top of the aquifer, and we want to make sure that we're being responsible when we're farming, because a lot of farming nowadays, when you're pressured to supply the demand, sometimes people use a lot of synthetics, and that means grow and pump all these chemicals into the environment, which is detrimental to our health and the soil health and the water. So organic farming, while it's not super productive, and we really just are mindful of our footprint, and when we're combating bugs and things, that we're spraying pesticides that are safe. We use things like neem oil or hot pepper that we grow at the farm. We crush it and make an oil. Ooh. So it's non-toxic to the environment. Are super grateful when they come and pick up their produce order and they say, "Oh man, we're short maybe a pound, the bugs got them." "Oh, it's okay, I'll just take it. We'll just cut the part off," because these are people who are buying into the organic and knowing that the role of insects play a big part in that, and just being okay with cutting off the part of the cucumber that got a little bug on it. Or so a barrier is that we're up in the north. It's kind of far. Unless you live up here, it can be challenging. I mean, even it takes some traveling to get here, and gas and resources. And so a lot of people have that issue too. So we try to meet them halfway. And another side of that is there's some people that would travel from Santa Rita Agate just to come up for our produce, because they like the fact that it's organic or local. So there are lots of people that still will make their route up here on a weekly basis. But on the topic of insect, I want to also mention that when I went to take an internship in the University of Los Baños in the Philippines. Ooh. In 2010, I saw this cool, they had an insectary where they were raising beneficial insects, so that you don't have, for their organic farm, so you don't have to use a lot of pesticide sprays, even that it's organic. Would raise a bunch of ladybugs so that you can set them free and let them aphids. And we talked about the ladybug, talked about the praying mantis. Honestly, spiders control roaches in your house or outside your house. They catch a lot of flies and other pesky things. So, and luckily on Guam, we don't have killer spiders or things that would harm you. So spiders, keep them. They're good guys, and they don't bite. The very essence of things we need in life is food, and knowing where our food comes from, and knowing our farmer, and taking care of the environment, which takes care of us. And yeah, so I think this is where I'll be at for the rest of my life, hopefully, God willing. If you need resources and help with seeds and seedlings, you're more than welcome to contact us at the Triton Farm. We're always willing to help share what we've learned. Not that we know it all, but we've made many mistakes ourselves, so we can like talk about those mistakes and hopefully help you to grow your own. Support your local farmer. If you're living in an apartment and you can't grow your own food, and I know a person that's coming up with a blog right now that can talk about where to access all of those local produce if it's not Triton Farm or Farm to Table or Guam Sustainable that everyone knows. Maybe they're the smaller niche farmers. So putting those resources together, I think we're really about resource sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And that we, a lot of our farmers right now that grow a lot of the local produce, they're getting older, and we need the next generation to know that it's important to carry on and to keep our soil safe and to keep farming and supporting local and organic farming too, right? So yeah, I think that's it.
I want to thank you. Thank you, Jessica Nangauta, and I hope for the listeners out there that this gives you the inspiration to grow your own food or support local initiatives and to find a way. We always make time and effort for the things that are important to us. Going into the next segment of information is from Chris Rosario. But before that, let's talk about the barriers of collaboration and partnerships when it comes to sustainability, the environment, and us, and how difficult it can be when we are thinking of a mindset of competition instead of creativity. What in the world does collaboration, competition, and creativity have to do with bees? What's going on? So let's go back to the relationship with our earth and humans. Humans and our earth have evolved in such a way that we have to collaborate with each other in order to survive and to thrive in any capacity. In any species that you see in nature, the ecosystems are so, in a sense, perfect. They are so perfect. They have their own systems that they have created throughout time that work in collaboration with each other, just like humans. Humans are fantastic at collaborating with each other. And there's an old saying that goes well with the mindset of competition. Competition sounds like, it's a dog-eat-dog world, or you snooze, you lose. And the most famous one that I've heard from many, many children and myself, I call dibs. And when we operate without each other, in competition instead of collaboration, it forms a mindset of scarcity. And going into collaboration, even bees work together. They dance together, and bees take on every common role in their hive or their community. They work together, and bees truly display that individual impact matters. Enjoy, Chris Rosario. I'm gonna go eat some honey.
So as we know, bees are the number one pollinating insect in the world. And what I mean by number one, it is the most heavily used insect in pollination in today's agriculture.
Okay.
And yes, we are talking about agriculture because that is how we sustain ourselves, through agriculture. And the reason why the bees do this so well is because, one, when a single bee flies from one flower to the other, it stays within that same family of flowers until it is finally finished foraging, going back and dumping the pollen into its so how this goes is that a single bee goes out and goes to, say, a violet, right? Or say lavender, okay? Let's say lavender.
Yeah.
So a bee goes onto one lavender, collects the pollen from the flower, pockets it, puts it on its leg called a cubicula, but you can just call it a pollen basket. But the pollen basket, yeah, is used to carry that pollen on the bee. And then it goes to that same type of flower. But sometimes along the way, when the bees go out and forage that pollen falls onto the flower, right?
Yeah.
And so pollination occurs at that point. And mind you, this is just a single honeybee.
Right.
Now, a single honeybee visiting one flower, like in a whole day, you're talking about maybe close to 10,000 bees.
Damn.
Just going out and foraging in that same single honeybee.
Right.
So the pollination is very efficient, especially if there's a lot of flowers of those same kind of flowers to forage pollen for. So the bees collect those pollen, gets it in their legs, brings it back, and then goes, or I'm sorry, pollination, yeah. Pollination is like fertilizing
I would have just kept going.
the flowers, right, yeah.
Okay.
But then you get seed. And then that seed then becomes a progeny of that tree, right?
Yes.
And so of course, without this pollination, you wouldn't even get the seed you wouldn't even get the first step. I think for the longest time we've actually had to get that negative stigma out of the bee world.
Right.
Normally when we think of bees, or you ask your parents, what do you think about bees? The first thing that usually comes to mind is they sting, they're Africanized, or the Africanized bee. Well, back in the early 1990s, the African honeybee.
Okay.
Well, okay, hold on. Let me go further back.
Gotcha.
In the early 1960s, 1970s, a Brazilian beekeeper went to Africa and brought African bees into Brazil.
Cool.
And then those African bees, well, for one, you want to see if those bees can be more honey producing, right?
Okay.
Because they're more aggressive and everything. It's just in the gene itself.
Right.
Well, what happened is those bees ended up coming out of the compound and actually started mating with the European honeybees.
Nice.
And now what happened is those European honeybees were hybridized as the Africanized killer bee. So so in the 1990s, we were labeling honeybees or Africanized honeybees as the killer bee. And because they would kill people quite often in the southern.
It was real.
It was a real thing,
Wow.
yeah. But this and that created a negative stigma towards bees within the next 20 years. When I grew up, right? I grew up and I was told, stay away from honeybees because they're gonna sting you and all this stuff. When I first got this job at the University of Guam to study honeybees, I was told, you're crazy to study honeybees.
Yeah.
But beginning to find out that, not a lot of people paid any attention to honeybees.
Right.
And that's part of the problem in today's world, is that they're seen still as the first thing that comes to mind is that they sting, and that, sure, now that we've kind of, at least with the Guam Beekeepers Association, whenever bees are found in someone's house or in someone's yard, they'll call a beekeeper as opposed to calling the pest control to spray them. So I think the gap really is getting our generation accustomed to bees becoming, and the future generations, that bees aren't all that bad. You know, there are bad things about bees, but there are good things about them too. And since 2017, we weren't able to find the mite since its discovery, for several reasons. One, again, that we don't have any major diseases that are affecting bees worldwide.
Okay. That's cool.
Two, we don't have large-scale agriculture. So the large-scale agriculture, basically what comes with large-scale agriculture is pesticides, right?
Yeah, right.
And so pesticides are a big problem but we don't use those large-scale agriculture. It's because we are small-scale agriculture. The crops in which they forage are they're diverse. So you can think of it with a large-scale agriculture, the bees only have one type of food source to feed on, but then it's only one type of food source, which limits them with the amount of nutrients that they take. So there's a lot of scientific research pointing in the direction of having a polyfloral environment. Poly, which is many floral, Okay. So bees need a polyfloral diet. Actually, bees in the science world, we found that a polyfloral diet gives the bees a more nutritious to be able to fight off any parasites or diseases that they may have. There are some areas we still tend to worry about, like of course we want to try and get rid of this chain of love, right? And the bees love this chain of love. So we're using herbicides to get rid of this chain of love.
I did not know.
So that's one of the big issues right now. Well, it's all a matter of balance, right? But that's why we try and especially on the islands where we're pretty fragile environment, we're very isolated, that we try not to use not insects, but we try not to use herbicides for that. So as we know, bees are the number one pollinating insect in the world. And what I mean by number one, it is the most heavily used insect in pollination in today's agriculture. And yes, we are talking about agriculture because that is how we sustain ourselves, through agriculture. And the reason why the bees do this so well is because, one, when a single bee flies from one flower to the other, it stays within that same family of flowers. How this goes is that a single bee goes out and goes to, say, a violet, right? Or say lavender, okay? Let's say lavender. So a bee goes onto one lavender, collects the pollen from the flower, pockets it, puts it on its leg called a cubicula, but you can just call it a pollen basket. But the pollen basket, is used to carry that pollen on the bee, and then it goes to that same type of flower. But sometimes along the way, when the bees go out and forage that pollen falls onto the flower, right? And so pollination occurs at that point. And mind you, this is just a single honeybee. Pollination is very efficient, especially if there's a lot of flowers of those same kind of flowers to forage pollen for. So the bees collect those pollen, gets it in their legs, brings it back, and then goes out and finds a different flower. And the first person who discovered this, or that documented this, was Aristotle.
What? So long ago.
That was so long ago.
That's so cool.
And it was a quote by Aristotle, because he was observing the environment, looking at the bees, and he saw that the bees were only going to these one single flowers. Like, why are they not going to the other flowers? Until he saw the bee go back and came right back out of the hive, right? And he saw, there's this other bee that's going on a different flower. That's cool. So as he looked at the foraging in for honeybees, right? He found that they're only visiting one flower, but that makes them very, very efficient pollinators. And so with that pollination comes, so before pollination, you get then an embryo. You get a seed, right? That forms, right? And so that seed that forms then ends up being produced by the plant. Think of a sunflower, right? And then that sunflower drops the seed, and there you have it. You have another type of another flower, or a tree, perhaps.
I have a very similar question, but I'm seeing a lot of gaps between like scientists and community, and particularly on Guam, there's a lot of cultural differences of how we go about science.
Yeah.
So this is more of like a holistic indigenous view that for this question. Like what is either something that you have learned from the bees, or something from culture that you can implement onto bees and how we communicate this
totally.
to people?
Well, I can definitely say from experience, because I worked in both realms. Mm-hmm. I've worked in the westernized view of science, right? Of science needs to be this, and this, right? It needs to be all about this. But then there's other views that I see that, like, look, it doesn't always have to be this way. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be those two sides of that coin that people are going to argue about. And I think the best way is what fits the lifestyle of the community as a whole, right?
Yeah.
It's a tricky part, because a lot of it is dominated by Western science, bringing in the traditional cultures, the tradition. Now, mind you, this is a westernized honeybee. This is a honeybee that came from Europe. The crazy part about this is that although these are westernized honeybees, they are not just feeding off of the plants that were brought in, but they're feeding on the local fauna, the local plants that are that have established here for many, many, many years. Right. So they've picked up on the diet of an islander, but being in when they're used to pollinating or getting fruits, getting their diet from apples and citrus, which not a lot of that stuff is indigenous here. So I think that just means that we need to implement some of the traditional knowledge to keep kind of keep the population here thriving.
Right.
Well, one great example is, so on my first year of beekeeping, I was actually using compressed cardboard, man-made, right?
Okay.
But a beekeeper in Saipan was like, well, why are you going to use that? I'm using this native tree, gagu. That's the ironwood tree. And so the ironwood was like a useful tool to create smoke. Because the compressed cardboard, I used the compressed cardboard to create smoke, to smoke the bees, right? To make them go to sleep. Well, why not use coconut husks? Why not use this native gagu tree that's readily available in the environment? Like, why am I buying this compressed cardboard, right? Wow. It goes to show that, look, this traditional knowledge, if I had it, gave me more resources. I mean, because it's out there, right? It's not like I have to buy compressed cardboard all the time and ship them over, right? Aside from doing that, I have right here out in my backyard some native gagu, Guam in 1907. So there's really, it's not that, and think of it in the geological terms. That's like very instantaneous. So so that's kind of what
Thank you.
The motivation in all this is the rewards that I see the bees giving the community. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, for one, we have now given the community more access to honey than there was before. Honey today is a very touchy subject. Honey is the most fraudulent food being sold today. Why? Because it is, one, marketed. It's marketed as honey, but actually made from corn syrup and not necessarily from the bees. Yeah. So us being able to bring in a local product, that's one big reward. Not only we gave access to the community of local honey, but also taught them that, hey, this is actually coming from this stinging insect that everyone was all so scared of.
Right.
So what keeps me going is really, for one, the farmers being able to get a product, a local Guam product, and to give it to someone and say, wow, this is the most great tasting honey in the whole world.
So good.
It becomes, that's a reward, and it's a product of Guam, because the honeybee is extracting all of these food sources from the local fauna, which I can't say too local, but there's just a lot of mix. But it gives us another resource that Guam can tap into and even show the tourist market to say, we have this product here. It's not just peppers anymore. It's not just it's also a local Guam product that we have. So I think that's the big one. To have this association, it made it more a cooperative collaboration between all the beekeepers, as opposed to competing with each other.
Cool.
Because it's not about competition, it's about collaboration amongst the beekeepers.
Chill.
Collaboration, you can get a whole community to do something. If you try and do competition, well, you're never going to get anywhere. You're always just going to be competing with your partner,
It's
right?
just fighting.
But if you
in the same
collaborate,
world.
you collaborate, and just as an island already is one thing. You imagine if it's in the region, on a regional perspective, to collaborate. So that's where my motive, where I'm still motivated to keep going, is because it doesn't stop at the island level. It stops at the regional level.
Thank you for finishing the episode with us for Earth to Body. We talked about the lack of awareness, how nature has all the instructions, and how we can holistically access that information through our bodies with the food choices that we have. We talked about the importance of diversity in an economic and an environmental aspect, and what it could mean to have everything or to have nothing. We talked with Jessica Nangauta. She shared her stories, and she is an excellent resource about Triton farms and locally sourced food. We talked about the framework of scarcity and how bees show us that each individual impact can make a difference. And finally, we talked to Chris Rosario and the ingenuity and resourcefulness of beekeeping. If you want, the DIY worksheet is available in PDF form, and in the description is resources mentioned in the episode. Wherever you are in the world, you're doing great, honey. Esta.